I'm out here in southern Spain again, visiting my mum, and I'm a little bit earlier this time than usual, so I'm out here in early March. And something I noticed is this thing. This is white asparagus, Asparagus albus, and this, in some of the plants, is actually producing edible shoots. So I think today we might go foraging for wild asparagus. And so you might be looking at this plant and thinking, this thorny, bushy thing, how on earth is that asparagus? What is he talking about? But this is a asparagus, if it's left to grow on, grows into big feathery plants normally, the cultivated asparagus species. This is a different species, but it does produce the shoots the same as regular cultivated asparagus, and there is one of them. And so I'm hoping you can see that that closely resembles cultivated asparagus. Now there are thorns on there already, but they're soft. I'm not going to pick it from here because it's right by the side of a path and people walk their dogs here, so I'm not going to pick there. But this plant grows abundantly across the hillsides here, so we're going to go off the track a bit and see if we can find some wild asparagus to pick and taste. Here's perhaps a clearer example of the plant. You can see, does that not just look like a shoot of asparagus? Again, I'm not going to pick it from here because this is right by a path. Here's a slightly more developed shoot. So these bits here are probably still edible, even though they're covered in thorns. Those thorns are only just starting to get sharp, and there's a shoot on the top there. Obviously you want to get it before that. So that's the wild asparagus. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is something which might appear to be a thing I've advised sternly against in the past, which is to travel to a different region and then forage for things that you think you know what they are based on their similarity to things back home. That is one of the potential ways to run into really serious trouble foraging. In fact, some of the worst incidents of accidental poisoning are from people who travel somewhere else in the world, forage something they think they recognize, and then poison themselves, death cap mushrooms in particular. But that's not what's happening in this video. This white asparagus, Asparagus albus, I am familiar with this not because it resembles anything I have back at home, although it kind of does. I'm familiar with this because I've taken an interest in learning to identify the flora of the Mediterranean region. So I understand what this is, not because it just feels familiar, but because I've looked it up, because I've researched it. And that's an important difference between that and just casually assuming that something is what it appears to be based on superficial likeness to something you're familiar with. So, as we've done in many a video before, we're going to head down into this dry river valley and see what we can find down here. There is moisture underneath the soil down there, so it might be a better place to go looking for this, for young shoots of this wild asparagus. But this is the plant here. Bright white stems, almost conifer-like, needle-like leaves, and very thorny. And we're going to find this plant all across this valley, in amongst all of this scrub vegetation. I mean, it's another example of it here. It's a very common plant. There's another one just down there, just over there, another one there. I don't think we're going to have any trouble finding lots of plants. We've just got to find it in a place where perhaps it's got a bit more moisture and maybe a little bit of shade. So maybe in a place where its development is just a little bit delayed. So we've got some over here. Let's have a look at these specimens. All looking very thorny here actually, and I can't really see much in the way of new shoots. Well, there's one that's gone right over. So I think the time window for getting this wild asparagus is probably pretty small, and it might be that we've just missed it, but I'll keep looking around, maybe in a shady spot or something. See, there's one again, just gone over probably by a week or two. But there's a lot of it about. There are a lot of plants here, so hopefully a lot of opportunities for a little bit of variety. So here we can see there's just a little bit of a gully here, and everything's a bit greener. down in the bottom of this gully. That tells me there's water potentially flowing in this little course here, and there are some of these wild asparagus plants down there. So let's go and have a look and see down here. Oh. Yeah, see, there's a lot more lush growth down here, but these plants are really very well developed. I'll have a look around on the shady side, but I'm not really seeing anything I can pick. I have a feeling we might just be a week or two late for this harvest. Oh my gosh, that's really sharp. Oh, there's one. Is that too far gone? I think I could probably pick that one. It might need some thorns just trimmed off it, but that one looks just about okay. Yeah, I think we'll have that one, and I'll just see where it wants to snap off. Not there. Yeah. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, there are some thorns on there, so I will have to trim those off, but that's my first asparagus shoot. I wonder if some of the side shoots off of that asparagus there might be usable. I think I am just a bit too late. It's such a shame. No, I think actually these bits might be all right. Yeah, these little side shoots. See, these look like terribly spiky thorns, but they're just not set yet. They're still soft. So I think these little side shoots here will be usable. We'll pick a few of those. I'll leave some so the plant still has a chance to produce some vegetation, although it's doing okay anyway. And again, I think we'll have a look down the bottom of this little bit here, because this is, again, it's a watercourse when it rains, so this will have a little bit more subsurface moisture probably. So we'll have a look around for some asparagus plants here. Not actually seeing many down here. That's interesting. That's rosemary right there. Lots of lavender in flower. Thyme down there. A beautiful cistus. Wouldn't want to walk down here when there's rain up in the hills, because this very suddenly becomes a raging watercourse under those sorts of conditions. On a day like today, it's lovely. Just so beautiful down here. So yeah, there we go. Next day, it's raining in all of this valley. Now, it doesn't always rain. Sometimes the weather goes right round this whole valley, and it can be raining everywhere else, especially the other sides of these hills, depending on the prevailing direction of the clouds. If they're coming towards us here, they will shed their rain on the other side of the hills. Here, the wind is behind us, the clouds are coming straight in off the sea, and they're being driven up inside this valley, and so it's raining quite steadily here. I don't know if this is going to be enough rain to cause a flood in the valley, but if it is, we'll go and have a look at that from a safe vantage point a bit later on today. So it only rained really for the morning, and probably not enough for water to flow down here. That's a shame. I would have liked to have shown you that. I mean, it's a shame from the point of view of making the video, but yeah, if it rains for days on here, sometimes the vegetation and the soil can soak up a certain amount of water, and then all of a sudden it reaches saturation and it all comes down at once and you get a flash flood. I mean, you can see from up here, you can see how there is a pattern of flow down this little valley. I just wish I could have shown you that in action. Maybe some other time. If we needed any reminder that this dry river valley is sometimes a watercourse, well, here is that reminder. Look at the smooth rock here. This rock has been polished smooth by sediment and rocks being washed over it forcibly by floodwaters, and you can see it's just been scoured smooth, and these channels have been cut by water cascading down here with rocks in it. One of my favourite little plants of this region, tiny little gladiolus, just found growing out of often tiny pockets of soil in the solid rock here. So at the moment I've not got very much wild asparagus in my bag, and I have already paid for it in blood. The plants are just incredibly viciously thorny, and so I mean, I suppose some sort of gloves might be in order, but I didn't bring any, and so when I reach in to try to pick the tender stems, I'm having to reach past the less tender parts. And as soon as this plant matures, as soon as the growth on this plant matures, it turns incredibly spiny. Okay, this might be more like it. Inside this bush, if I can get in there, and that is the problem. We've got two very nice shoots there. How about that? That is a nice bit of wild asparagus, and there's another one there. All around me, the air is filled with the sound of the humming of bees. And do you know why the bees hum? It's because they don't know the words. Yeah, see, this one's just too far gone. That would have been this year's growth. And you can see how asparagus develops into this branch structure here, but this is now starting to get really prickly and tough. One of the questions people often ask me about my visits here is, aren't you concerned about snakes? Certainly there are snakes in Spain. There are a couple of quite venomous species as well. They are somewhat reclusive though. So whilst you might find them basking out on a rock, they will typically, when they sense your footsteps approaching, retreat into a place of safety until you've passed by. Certainly if I was sticking my hands into places that I can't see, or walking through undergrowth where I can't see where I'm putting my feet, that might be more of a risk. But in general, I mean, I haven't seen a single snake while I've been out here. They are definitely here, but you have to be a combination, I think, of unlucky and foolhardy to run into trouble with one. But yeah, so, you know, pile of rocks here. If I was to go and stick my hand in crevices there, that could be a bad thing to do. So I won't do that. I mean, it perhaps goes without saying that this terrain requires you to be looking where you're putting your feet anyway, because you can't just walk along these trails with your eyes somewhere else. You have to be looking where you put your feet, or else you come a cropper. So part of that looking process is also avoiding snakes. Like I say, I've never encountered one on all of my visits here. They are probably here. Maybe they're even looking at me from up in those rocks up there. Anyway, I think I've probably got more or less enough asparagus for just a little taste, which is all I really want. And I have paid the price. There was another cut on my skin now. So this plant provides food, but it does charge for the privilege. Another thing that's out and about after this relatively moist period is these snails. And these are prized by the local people here. In fact, after rain, you quite often see the locals out here prizing up bushes with long sticks to look underneath for the snails. So that's a thing. I don't think I will be sampling that as an edible thing. I've eaten snails before. Land snails tend to be not very interesting until you cook them in something interesting. But yeah, I won't be doing that this time because I think they need to be purged before you can eat them anyway. Interestingly polished rock there, look at that. Piece of calcite, I think, maybe, with some iron staining in it. So here I think we've got, geologists correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this here is a schist, and I think what we've got here is mica. So a micaceous schist, perhaps. Sparklies in the ground. Quite enticing sparklies when you just catch a glimpse of them. You know, you might think, oh, gold, but it's not gold, it's different sparklies. But there's a lot of it in the soil here. Some of these little sparklies might be quartz crystals as well. And there are precious metals up in the hills around here, mostly mined out, I think. But historically there's been silver. In fact, we might visit the mines in a different video. This little plant here with all the white flowers, I used to think this was Bath asparagus. I don't think it actually is. I think this is an asphodel. Yeah, according to my Seek app, which I trust well enough to identify things I'm not intending to eat, this is onion-leafed asphodel. Asphodelus fistulosus. That may or may not be true. We need to be a little bit wary of app identifications. The Seek app is usually pretty good when it's, by the time it gets down to the species, but it can make mistakes. They all can. Lots and lots of bees here. It's so lovely to see the bees busy amongst the flowers. Bees here with bright red pollen sacs on their legs as well. I wonder where that pollen's come from. Right, slightly unusual conditions here, but we're just going to cook this asparagus ever so lightly in a pan. So that's just been washed and trimmed. I'm going to put it in there like that, just until I hear it sizzling. Just dry frying it. And as soon as I hear that starting to sizzle, which is now, let's give that a little toss. And then a tiny bit of water. I'm just going to poach that now in a tiny bit of water until that's evaporated. Bit of butter, and that'll just need a couple more minutes. It might need a bit longer than cultivated asparagus because I have a feeling this might be a little bit tougher. Okay, well, we'll see you at the table in a moment. So here we go, wild asparagus in Spain. Quite a lot more flavourful, I would say, than cultivated asparagus. A little bit bitter. Perhaps I left it too late, but it's ever so tender. Other than that, it does just taste like asparagus. So Julie, my sister, is enjoying this more than I did, I think. She says bitter is fine.
Asparagus is good.
So that was Spanish wild asparagus, Asparagus albus. A bit disappointing to eat, if I'm completely honest, but not a disappointing experience, because I had this curious itch about this plant, about what it must be like to taste the young shoots. It wasn't all that pleasant. That could just be because I'm a bit late. Perhaps I need to be here in January or early February to pick the really young, tender, developing shoots before they get bitter. I don't know. Maybe that bitterness is just a feature of this plant. I don't know. If you're from the Mediterranean region and you're familiar with foraging this plant, then do let me know in the comments whether this is a nicer thing to eat when it's picked a little bit earlier in the season, or if that's just a thing that people accept as an attribute of this wild plant. Anyway, I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.